Simon is a flood and coastal risk management advisor at the Environment Agency, and he is going to give the Environment Agency's perspective of flood risk and planning system. So Simon, over to you.
Good morning all. My name's Simon Dart. I'm based down in Devon in the southwest of the country, and I've been dealing with sort of development planning and regulation of the watercourses for about over 20 years now. Next slide, please. Most of you are probably aware of some of the historical events that we've had in the southwest and probably around the country as well. But obviously Boscastle in 2004 got a lot of live images on television at the time. Then we had Coverack a couple of years ago. And as you can see there, I want you to note that the amount of water, but also the fact that it's sunny. So that obviously there's a particular problem that we have very short, sharp flooding with massive thunderstorms, and then it's all over in terms of the rainfall, but not the impacts. And the other big event that we had down here in 1952, so it's just coming up to its 75-year anniversary, is Lynmouth, when some people did lose their lives, and literally the whole town, there's a swathe of houses knocked down and caused a lot of problems. Next slide, please. We have about 20% of the UK's total for rapid response catchments, and the definition is a bit weird. And it says that it responds rapidly to a rainfall event. That's down to the speed of the response, the severity of the flooding, and the presence of a vulnerable population. Now, the speed of the response always makes me laugh a little bit. That is because some of my national colleagues get worried when they only have 1 or 2 days of a flood wave coming down the Thames or down the Severn or the Trent or whatever it is. We laugh because sometimes we're lucky if we get 20 minutes or even 2 hours of an event. So it's all down to where you are in the country. Rapid response catchments came into existence in the definition since the flooding in 2004 for the Boscastle floods. It looked at all the historical evidence we had and the causes and came up with that definition. Now, something that we do have in the southwest, and so do other places in upland areas, is tourists that can be present. So the caravans and camping can be washed away, or just people wandering around the towns. The other big issue that we have is that there are no specific flood warnings for this type of flood event at the moment. We have general flood alerts, and obviously the Met Office can issue a yellow alert for thunderstorms, but it's so localized, it's been very difficult to do that. However, we are just about to start doing some very localized flood warning in the next year or two based on radar, rainfall gauges, and runoff sensors. So hopefully that will be coming along shortly. Next slide, please.
Stock.
Rapid flooding is not new. You'll see it there from those 2 pictures. That is Braunton in North Devon that flooded in 2012 quite severely. And then the photograph above it is from 1931. And also on the side there is a rainfall map, which shows in 1929, we were having 5, 4, even 3 inches of rain in 1 hour, which is quite intense rainfalls. But what the thing has changed recently is that it appears to become more frequent. That is partly due to climate change, but also partly to do with land use changes. And by that, I mean that we have built stuff in daft locations, if you look at it that way, but also the way that we manage land has changed significantly over the past 100 years. That's the intensification of farming, different types of crops. We've got rid of hedges, we've got rid of trees. I did a study in North Devon, looked in a small catchment, only 1.5 kilometres squared, and 11 kilometres of hedges have been lost in the past 100 years. And that is a staggering amount of barriers to flooding. Next slide, please. Before I go on to some of the solutions, this is an example where things got wrong. This is a town of Ottery St Mary in East Devon, and there was a housing estate built where that red circle is. And the blue line is the River Otter. Now, we all know about the flooding from the River Otter. Ottery has a long history of flooding, and particularly from rapid flooding, but mainly to the other side of the town, at the forefront of the picture. But in 2008, we had 160 millimeters in 3 hours, or 6 inches, from the land above. And you'll see from the picture there, it was a mixture of hail and water. And it caused an obscene amount of runoff from that area. And you can see that picture of the muddy field. That is not a watercourse, that's just a field. and literally just took away all the farmers' topsoil and put it down in this housing estate. Now, the housing estate had dealt with the flooding from the River Otter, but hadn't dealt with the risks from this tiny stream and from the land above it. There was it was kind of approved against our objection, but there was sort of politics involved in this. But it was sort of given approval in the late 1990s and built in the early noughties. Next slide, please. The other weird thing about this is that the plans weren't followed. We had agreed that floor levels would be raised above the surrounding area. And the picture on the left shows the red line is the sort of height of the riverbank, and the green line is where the floor level should be. And the blue arrow is where the flooding got to. So it's quite obvious that they didn't build it correctly, which exacerbated the problem that we had. And on the right-hand side, you can see that although we did put undercroft car parking and had the sort of residential bits above, you know, when we were talking about people were wading around in chest-deep water and then had the ice floating on top of it, it just didn't deal with the problem. Next slide, please. Now, obviously, with that Ottery one that we were just talking about, the planning system can't resolve that now. It's been done, it's in place. We had to come along and do a few things afterwards. What we've been doing down in Devon and Cornwall for the past 20 years is something we've called problem catchment areas or critical drainage areas. Now, these were introduced in Devon and Cornwall, as I said, probably about the early noughties, and it just said, look, there's a problem here. We've got to do something above and beyond the normal system. We basically lobbied government, and so therefore in the PPS 25, when that came out in 2006, it was included in that, and we were able to come out with some sort of official designation, and we had to inform our local councils that we had done this and what was going to go ahead. There's about 25 in Devon and Cornwall now, and basically said there's a problem catchment with a history of flooding. There's no easy flood scheme, and it generally is upland areas that run down into a old town or old village where the drainage network or the river system, you know, hasn't got any space for any new flooding. We also decided that it had to be some sort of growth, and with that new growth, the sods that was required would have to be to a higher standard than normal. We were trying to mimic greenfield runoff rate, and that would be so that during the very large storm events that you have to design for, it would reduce it right back to what we call a 10% chance storm happening in any one year, and also lower the volumes. You get to get more water into the actual ground rather than it running off. And this example here is a one-page sheet that we give out to people. We also give it out in a GIS layer, and it's for a town in Bideford, and that's in North Devon. Next slide, please. So you can see there from the map, the blue area is the land that is either being built upon or it's going to be built in the new allocations. So it's about 60% of the catchment is going to be urban. And we've been doing this now, as I said, for quite a few years. And basically, we had no challenges from the developers. Once we explained it and said, look, this is the reason why we want these to high standards. This is what we want you to do. We helped them with the sort of type of calculations that they needed to do and the control structures. But once we, said to them and explained the benefits of the SUDs and the green spaces, because that was all new at the time. So green infrastructure was incorporated in this. But the other major thing for us and why this catchment was so critical is that there already was a flood storage area, a flood dam, where that green circle is, and that protected Bideford, or parts of Bideford, from flooding on a frequent basis. It had happened probably about 30 times in the past 30 years that there were issues in Bideford. So we built that, and then all this growth came along, and we knew it was going to sort of lower the standard that this dam offered. But the remaining part was, what do we do with the 40% of the catchment that wasn't going to be touched by planning? And if you go on to the next slide, please. There's not much we could do through the planning system. So what we did, the agency and many local groups, was started to do natural flood management systems. That's things like you've probably heard of: leaky dams, soil improvement, and that's a key one. So farmers can carry on using their land as, for agriculture, or be it arable or dairy sort of herding, but the soil is able to absorb more water. We also worked with community groups and something called Woods for Water, where we started planting woodlands in areas where it would help to reduce runoff, but also in some places plant in floodplains which slow the water down. That's the key. It's about slowing the water, so the amount of water getting down to our dam and helping out that way. Next slide, please. But NFM, it's not the only solution. But we've been doing lots of pilot projects in Devon and Cornwall, both on Exmoor and Dartmoor, and it's trying to treat the source of the flooding in the first place to stop it running down into the towns. And most rural areas and urban areas, if there's enough sort of space you can affect, we have got the community groups involved, local schools and local green groups or local council groups, parish groups. They've all wanted to have a go with tree planting. On Dartmoor, we have lots of sort of stone hedges, and that picture there shows basically it's a leaky dam. The water will fill up in a ditch and then slowly go through this wall. So it's tailored to local conditions. We're also working with Exeter University because their campus is part of a problem area that runs down into an area of housing that we want to try to improve. So we're working with them to plant trees and create some issues in that. But the main key thing for this is that none of this is linked to development planning. There's nothing we can do in the planning system at the moment, apart from the normal general policies of climate change, green spaces, public open space. There's nothing you can sort of resolve the current problems if you're not building anything. Next slide, please. So what we've been able to do for some of our developments is, and this is the more strategic level ones, is to influence from the very beginning what we want to happen. This is Cranbrook in East Devon, which is a brand new town. So obviously we were able to influence the big green spaces in between the housing developments. Now this was floodplain and plus a bit more. And it provided the public open space. It also provided the edge. The suds ponds were along the edges, so it didn't take up any land for the housing developer. And also, it's been used widely by the local community. And you can see from that picture, most of the time it is grassland, parkland. You wouldn't know it's a floodplain except when there's very heavy rain. So it has multiple uses for that. And from this start, we've now expanded it out to do what we call the Cliff Valley Regional Park. And this is interlinking all the sort of communities and farmland, woodland, everything like that, from up to Killerton, where the National Trust is, all the way down to the River Exe and its tidal estuary, and also trying to reconnect floodplains. And I always forget what SANG stands for, but it's basically it's compensatory habitat for new developments to stop them going down to more important environment places like we have on the River Exe and nearby Woodbury Common. So it's all interlinked, and this has been a massively joint plan between ourselves, all the local interest groups, as well as local councils, district councils, county councils, and things like that. So next page, please. Next slide, please. The other problem that we have is sometimes it's kind of fitting things into retrofitting into a problem. This is Barnstable, North Devon, and it's on the Bideford water where that red circle is. It's on the very edge of Barnstable, and it has the upstream end of the town, a triple SI, that's the picture in the top of the screen, and a wildlife wetland area to the south just before it goes into the tidal River Tor. And the biggest problem with this is that then no one wants to actually build in this area. It's a beautiful area, but it was a case of we would like to create some a space for people and water in this area, but also linking it up so the locals try and claim ownership of this, and so to make best use of that area. And we started working with the council on this, and that's sort of a picture with all the green, purple, funny red lines and stuff. That is something that the agency is beginning to produce in certain areas in Devon, I don't know about elsewhere in the country, of a vision of what we, the agency, would like to do. And we're also linking this to the NFM further upstream. Now that has a knock-on effect on water quality and also on to preventing soil erosion for the farmers. And so there's multiple of uses. It's not just flood risk the agency is thinking about, it's multiple uses. And we're trying to do this for many spots where we can retrofit stuff. And if the planning system can help and get something in their local plan, we are applying it at the right time. Next slide, please. The other thing that we're trying to do is also how we can affect the upland management. That photograph of the clouds is a very, very heavy thunderstorm in August of this year. And in the OS Ordnance Survey map, there's that red dotted circle. That's about the size of the thunderstorm that happened. All the water ran off the hills straight down to town, and in total, I think about 140 properties flooded. Now, this is already a critical drainage area, but as you can see from the sort of the allocation plan that North Devon Council has, most of the development is not in that area, so we can't actually affect the upland land. Next slide, please. So what we are trying to do is there a way that the local plan can be used to change the source of the urban flooding? And we come up with an area of critical drainage areas plus critical flood areas, but we're also working on a pilot with the National Use Framework in Devon. We've been asked nationally to do this, and that's basically looking at a way that our mapping and our vision and the planning systems of various organisations get together and help affect that land colored in orange and in purple to say what can we do there that helps the urban housing downstream and new planning downstream, and what can it be done? And it's all very early days in this, but what we're also trying to do is link this to net gain. Developers have to do net gain, but unfortunately they probably don't want to do it on their site because they lose valuable development space. But if, for example, they could contribute to a community fund or a local fund, could others help in the upland areas? So it's all interlinked, and we're trying to sort of tease this out to see if it's possible. And I'm working closely with North Devon and Torres District Councils to try and come up with some ideas for this, and also with this pilot project that we're doing and the land use framework. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. We're very lucky in Devon. We have some unique solutions. One of them is beavers. We have both beavers that are in enclosures, so they don't run away and they stay in a fixed area. And a couple Scottish beavers has just been released in the city of Plymouth. They are in quite a heavy urban area, but in a rural valley, and they are helping to create the dams and wetland areas. But we've also got wild beavers in the River Otter in East Devon. They've been there now for about 7-8 years, and they have really wetted up some of the smaller tributaries of the River Otter and are doing a great job. And generally, everybody loves them. And we're hoping that the trial was a success. There's a lot more information on the Devon Wildlife Trust page, but the DEFRA have said that they can stay and they could be expanded. And that's my talk. Thank you very much.